Here we are, the final chapters. We're going to get two of them tonight of 1 Samuel. Let's take a quick review. Want to do a quick review? Yeah. Let's flip back to 1 Samuel chapter 1 real quick. Let's remind ourselves all the things we've covered. If you remember the birth of Samuel, that Elkanah and Hannah were going to worship, and Elkanah had two wives, and Hannah was one of them, and the other one had all the kids, and Hannah didn't have any kids, so she said, God, please, can I have a child? And if I do, I'll give him back to you. And she was crying at the altar, and the priest walked up and was like, lady, you're drunk. Too much communion wine for you, right? And she was like, no, I'm not drunk. I'm just really crying because I'm really fervently asking the Lord for a baby. And he goes, oh, okay, well then I'm going to pray for you too to have a baby. I'm going to give you a blessing for that. Sure enough, she had a baby. So then we look at the end of chapter 1, the dedication of Samuel. He goes up there and he's weaned, which means he's probably 2-3 years old, and he's able to wipe his butt and that kind of stuff. And they leave him at the temple, or not temple yet, it's a tabernacle. They leave him at the tabernacle, and he becomes one of the choir boys, whatever. He just is helping out with whatever they need done. And so we see the prayer of Hannah, and she's going back and forth, and she's bringing him, extra clothes because he's growing and all that kind of stuff. And then we get into chapter 2, the priest, as we come into 1 Samuel, the priest's name is Eli. And Eli has sons, Hophni and Phinehas, and they're basically sleeping around and stealing from the altar and taking bribes and money and all sorts of stuff. Really corrupt. So Eli and his two sons are basically, hey, you're done. You're kind of done. Chapter 3, God called Samuel. And so Samuel becomes the head priest and kind of a prophet to kind of declare to Israel, you're making mistakes here, guys, fix this. And then we see the Ark of God gets captured, if you remember that, and then it went to the Philistines, to the different towns, and they ended up having boils and sores and rats and all these things as the Ark was there, cursing them, basically, because it wasn't where it was supposed to be. Yeah. And so they said, in chapter 6, we're going to return that sucker back to Israel. We don't want it anymore. Send it back, right? And so 7, you see that Samuel is having conversations with the leaders of Israel, and they're saying, we kind of want to have a king. And he's like, you got a king. We got God who led us through the desert, through Moses, God who led us in through fire and smoke, through Exodus. We talked about all this stuff, right? We studied Exodus. Like, what do you mean a king? We're like, yeah, we know we got God. I mean, like, whatever, it's just God. Yeah. But like, we want like an actual dude that we can high five, and we can like, oh, I reverence myself to you, and all that kind of stuff.
High five. We get executed for trying to high five the king then.
Yeah. So they demand a king. Chapter 8, they demand a king. So Samuel gets upset with them, and he says, you guys are really screwing up here. You guys are making a terrible choice. God is doing this. And God actually comes into Samuel and says, Samuel, hold on. They're not upset with you. They're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me. Let's give them what they want. Let's see what happens. So Samuel then anoints Saul as the king. Saul was from humble beginnings, but he was a hometown quarterback looking dude, kind of the hometown hero. And they say, okay, well, you're going to be the king. And then there was really kind of nothing for him to do. So he just kind of sat around in the Oval Office for a couple of months playing with the Legos and the crayons because there was kind of nothing for him to do. And finally, the Philistines were coming in to attack again. And he was like, well, that doesn't sound right. I need to go defend my people over here. And so he went over there and he defended them. And then they were like, yeah, this guy is our king. Woo! Look at us go. We got this guy, Saul. Yeah. And that's pretty much the climax of Saul. Yeah. That's pretty much it. So he wasn't just crowned king, but he was also declared king, confirmed as king in chapter 11 there. And Samuel says, listen, guys, I'm going to tell you, I've been doing this for a while now. I don't agree with Saul being king. I'm going to serve God. I'm just going to kind of fade into the background here. Peace out. I'm gone. Okay? So that's chapter 12. Chapter 13, Saul, doesn't do what he's supposed to do. Then Jonathan, his son, shows real bravery and goes and sneaks over to the enemy camp. Remember that? And instead of saying, man, look at my son, that's bad to the bone. Good job, Jonathan. Man, props to you and your little crew of misfits for breaking rank and going over there and starting something, because you guys dealt with it. Nice job. Instead of saying that, he said, you disobeyed me. You're not the one who is in charge here. I'm the king. He couldn't take the spotlight off of
I don't
himself.
know if you just said this, but wasn't Saul from like one of the nobody tribes?
Yeah, it was from the nobody's
One of
tribe.
the tribes that wasn't?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of a weird extra fact, I guess. But
Yep. Yep. And so Saul then makes an oath to some other kings. The Lord just then outright rejects Saul in chapter 15. Chapter 16, Samuel is told by God, I've rejected Saul. I'm going to have you anoint this other guy over here. So he goes to the house of Jesse, and he says, Jesse, bring me your son. So he brings him this one. He's a hometown quarterback looking dude. That's not the one. That's a good looking dude. He's probably a wrestler. No. This one here, he's probably like in the school play and like played the lead role, but that's not the one. Is this all the sons you got? I said, well, I got one more way out in the pasture, some young kid, he's just out there like,
The boy, the youngin.
bring him in. Let's see, let me look at him. And God said, this is the one. And that was David. And so we see that in chapter 16. David's brothers are fighting the Philistines yet again. Do you see a pattern here where Israel's fighting the Philistines over and over and over and over and over again? Philistines, again, are the ancient Palestinians. And what's happening right now?
Same thing.
They're fighting the Palestinians. It's the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over. Okay? All the way back to 1 Samuel. It actually goes back further than that. I actually have that in my notes here to reference. All the way back to Genesis chapter 14 is where it's first mentioned the Amalekites, which we'll talk about. David fights Goliath, cuts off his head.
17,
Yeah, it's in chapter 17. Then Saul's like, uh-oh, David's popular.
Yep.
He's young and hip. He's not a coward. He's doing all the right things because he's serving God, not himself, at least up to this point. And then he says, man, compared to me, I am not worthy to be king. He really is worthy to be king. He didn't know that he'd been anointed. And so, the women were singing and dancing, oh, Saul has slain his thousands, but David his tens of thousands, right? So Saul gives his daughter Michal to him in marriage, tries to trick him, but he figures out a way around it. Then Saul just outright tries to kill David. Then David and Jonathan come together in an oath in chapter 20, where they're going to protect each other and hold each other accountable and live with one another. David is being chased by Saul still, so he goes to Nob, where the priests are kind of hanging out for the time being. And as Saul gets wind of that, he goes to the Philistines, to Gath, which is the home of Goliath the giant that he slew. And he had just picked up in Nob Goliath's sword in chapter 21 there. And as he's leaving, David protects his parents and sends them over to Moab, which if you remember, was way over here on this side of the Dead Sea. He gets them away from everything. He protects his parents. But Saul is upset that the priest helped David out in any capacity. And so he goes in there and sends his general and slays all of the priests and all the helpers and everybody except for one who gets away, Ahimelech. And then David saves a city that's been attacked by the Philistines in 23 here. And Saul, in the middle of being the one protecting that town, Saul is still chasing David. And here we see David doing all the right things, and he's still being chased. David is hiding out in caves with his friends, and Saul goes in there to take care of some business, take a bathroom break, and takes off his robe before, we take our pants down, right? But they're not wearing pants. So they take their outer robe off so they can take care of business. Well, that robe was sitting over there and David cut the corner off of it, right? Remember that whole story? So that was in chapter 24. And then Samuel dies and they have a funeral and mourn him. And then David, on his way out of the south where he is working in the shepherd area, dealing with all the sheep and flock that are down there. He ends up marrying remember the guy's name was Nabal. Nabal means foolish or fool. And Nabal had a heart attack, turned to stone.
Right.
Remember that? And so David was like, well, you're a pretty good looking lady and your husband's dead, so why don't you come with me and be my wife? She's like, okay.
He really turned to stone?
Like it said, his heart turned to stone. He had a heart attack.
Oh, God.
And then on the way, like they're walking, he's like, that's a good looking chick too. Why don't you be my wife too? He's just picking up, because Saul had taken away his daughter back away from him and given that daughter to somebody else. So apparently they didn't have, it was just a decree, not a divorce. So whatever.
Not necessarily being unfaithful, it was taken from him.
Yeah, it was taken from him, right. Then David spares Saul's life again. Could have killed him, because remember he snuck in between, while he was sleeping, snuck in between everybody.
Yep.
And it wasn't just that they were sleeping, they were probably under like sleep paralysis. They were like under anesthesia by God. And then David's been living for over a year and a half, he's been living with the Philistines.
Yep.
And he's been telling the king Achish of that little city-state, he's been telling, oh yeah, I'm going and taking all these southern Judah people, man. I'm just taking it to him. I'm slashing and I'm stealing and robbing and plundering and whatever. But he was actually killing Achish's family and friends that were nearby.
Yeah.
And so Achish is standing up for him. Remember last week we talked about, oh, I'm standing up. And there's nothing wrong with David. What do you mean? He needs to go to war with us. And the other Philistines were like, this is David. He's a Hebrew. He's an Israelite. He's a Jew. Not coming to fight with us and be on our backside and start killing us from behind. I don't care how much you trust him, but that's not happening. So the Philistines reject David, and so he goes back home, right? So we ended last week in chapter 29, verse 11. So David and his men rose early to depart in the morning and returned to the land of the Philistines, but the Philistines went up to Jezreel. So,
Thanks for the rewrite.
is that a cool recap?
Yes, sir, it was. It reminded me of everything I was trying to get, I guess.
So, this is where we kind of come to the climax of 1 Samuel. Now, we call it 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel. In the original text, it's just the story of Samuel.
Yeah, I remember for Miles it was less the Kings as well.
Kings as well.
Kings and Samuel,
And Chronicles.
There was Samuel, there was a King, there wasn't one and two.
Samuel.
And Chronicles.
Yeah, all three, right.
Yeah, we call it 1st and 2nd, but it really
Yeah,
just
it's
was
a bigger
one.
book, yeah.
All right, so we're gonna start going through chapter 30, verse 1 together. Let's start reading. And when David and his men came to Ziklag on the 3rd day, so remember they're heading back south out of that marching party. They're heading back south, back to the Philistine area where he was, and they arrived at Ziklag. Ziklag is where David and his people had set up camp, basically. Outside in the campground outside of the town where Achish was the king, they set up Ziklag. And so the men came to Ziklag on the 3rd day. So it took 3 days of hiking. That means they were probably 45 to 60 miles from where they were coming from. Because they're hiking between 10 to 20 miles a day. So 30 to 60 miles. Yeah. Okay? So they've been hiking for a while. And they show up and it says, the Amalekites had raided the south as far as Ziklag. So the Amalekites, if you don't remember them, you can switch over to, they're mentioned first in Genesis 14, and they're also in Exodus 17. If you'll remember Exodus 17, I'll flip over there real quick. Exodus 17, remember Moses, he struck the rock and water came out of the rock so that they could drink. And then Amalek himself came and fought with Israel in this Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, choose men for us and go out and fight, because they didn't have an army. So they said, just choose some men, go out, and tomorrow I'll stand up on the top of that hill. And when I have my arms raised up, God will be with us. Well, he was holding it up, and as his hands became heavy and his arms kept coming down, they would start losing. And so they had to hold him up. So they put a rock underneath him so he would sit, and one person on either side held his hands up so that they could win that battle. You remember that? That was the Amalekites they were fighting. That's these same people who are burning David's hometown. So when you read the Bible, it's all connected. It's not interdependent stories. These are all interconnected. They're not independent stories, okay? So they had struck Ziklag and burned it with fire, and they had as captive all the women who were there. And they did not kill anyone, but carried them off and went about their way. So they were going further to the southeast. So let me draw my little map here so you can kind of get an idea where we are. We got the big blue out here, right? And this is the, remember what that is?
Yeah, Nile River.
Nile River. And then way up here we got this, and then we got this, and we got this. Remember that?
Dead Sea.
Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea.
Okay.
Right?
There's
So,
fresh water, right?
so this is the Gaza Strip. This is still today. That's where the Philistines are, the modern day Palestinians. Okay, that's where they are. So we'll put a big P in there. And so this is Moab. This is kind of some mountain terrain over here on this side of the Dead Sea here. And there's just kind of some hill country right through the middle here. Okay, and so you've got Jerusalem is about right there. Bethlehem is about right there. You got an idea, right, where we are now?
Yeah.
Okay. So Ziklag is somewhere down in here. That's where we'll put a Z for Ziklag in there. And the Amalekites, if you remember, they were trying to go into southwestern Saudi Arabia. That's where, I mean, northwestern Saudi Arabia. That's where Mount Sinai actually is. It talks about that. That's where Midia is, okay? In the Bible, it's called the land of Midia, or Midian, okay? So the Amalekites, they hung out in this region right here. So when I say 30 to 60 miles, what I'm talking about is when they were marching this way, remember they were coming up here and they were going to the Har Megiddo, the hill of Megiddo, the Armageddon, right? And so they were going right here, so it's actually kind of levels out into a plain right here. And you had the Jezreel Valley, and so as they were marching up here to go attack and fight with the Israelites up here, they were coming up this direction. Well, David and his men were told to turn around. So when they turned around, they had to come something like 30 to 60 miles to get back to Ziklag, and that's why it took them 3 days to get there. Mm-hmm. Is that making sense now?
Yeah.
All right. So, verse 3. David and his men came to the city, and they found it burned with fire, and their wives, their sons, and their daughters taken captive. So David and the people that were with him lifted up their voice and wept until they had no strength in them to weep. So the first question I have about this is, why are they so upset?
Yeah.
I mean, if my wife and kids just got taken away, so they first of all, they know that they're alive. If they were dead, they would be bodies charred or chopped up or whole or whatever it is. Their bodies would be around there.
Yeah.
But there was no bodies. It was very clear, both in the previous verses and in that verse, that there was no bodies. So they were alive. Wherever they were whole, right? So instead of just stopping and having a pity party and crying, as a man in particular, and I think most of you are probably that same way, something happens that's bad, what do you start doing? How do I fix this?
Right.
Where are they? How far away are they? How fast can I catch it up to them? How do I get, how many people do we have? How many people do we think they have? Can we overpower them? Can we overtake them? Can we, right?
Yeah.
You see what I'm talking about? But what did they do? How was their reaction?
Right.
Verse 4, David and the people that were with him lifted up their voice and wept until they had no strength in them to weep. Why would they just stop and cry until they were just utterly empty of energy? I will tell you what my personal opinion is that I think they're realizing they are in no man's land. They're Jews, Hebrews, Israelites, that should be fighting with Israel, their people. They've been living with the enemy, with the Philistines. And that's going to come to roost at some point, that they've been killing all these surrounding people. And then you got the Amalekites, who they've been fighting for thousands of years now. For probably almost 1,000 years, they've been fighting the Amalekites. So I think that they were just, physically exhausted for hiking for 3 days. And I think that mentally and emotionally and spiritually, they were at a place where they were like, we're not where we need to be.
They're
crying for Jesus' help.
Yeah, they were crying out for the help of the Lord, right? They're basically saying, the Amalekites attack us from the south. The Philistines are going to attack our people, our relatives up north. We're not welcome with our relatives up north. What do we do? What do we do? We feel helpless. We feel out of control. So my first reaction is like, you know, like I look like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando, you know, in 1980s when he's like, you got my daughter, no way. I'm going to get her back right now, right? That kind of stuff.
It's Kill Count. No bullet to him. It's Kill Count. Just that one's classic. That's almost like what would nowadays be a parody.
Oh yeah.
What happened in Commando would be a parody now.
Yeah, it would be a parody
And
now.
it would happen exactly like in Commando. It would be a parody now.
But I love it. I think it's
Oh,
great.
yeah. Oh,
It's
yeah.
one of
I
my
watched it like
favorite
a year ago.
all-time
The first
movies.
time, like 30 years, hilarious.
All right. So the whole point is,
Anyway.
that's not what they did. They weren't like, let's go get them. They were like, what do we do? They were crying, but they weren't crying out to God necessarily. They weren't crying to anything, right? There's another time when bad things are happening and the Hebrew people are crying. Do you remember when that was? In the beginning of Exodus, it said that a new Pharaoh came to power who did not remember Joseph and all the great things that he had done, and he made them to be slaves. And they were crying and groaning underneath the work and the weight of being slaves to the Egyptians. Didn't say they were crying to God, they were just crying and moaning about their position where they were. Same thing's going on here. So this is now where we're starting to see these patterns like going all around again. We make bad choice, and now things are going really bad. We're going to cry out, something's going to happen. And they're going to get called back in. They're going to get called, but they're going to be doing it ungratefully. They're going to be doing it dragging the feet all the way
I
up.
remember from my Old Testament survey course, that's basically the summary of the Old Testament right there.
And so that's going to happen again, and then it's going to go down.
My bad,
It's going to happen again, and then it's going to go down. And it's going to happen again, and then it's going to
My
go
bad, forgive and
down.
screw up again.
Yeah. But you know what? That really is a microcosm. That's really a zoomed in view of my life and your life, our lives.
No, you're right. Yeah.
Because how many times I'm like, man, I was thinking about this on Sunday. I was sitting right over there, and I was thinking, man, my wife and I are getting along right now. We're doing really good. We're enjoying. Our kids are not perfect. We've got disciplinary issues with, you know, acting out in class or whatever, class clown type stuff or whatever. They're all passing all their classes, doing well in sports. So like, things are pretty good. I mean, like we're all in pretty good health. Like there's no big deals going on. But a year ago, if you'll remember, when I was talking to you guys and I was confessing to you guys, like a year ago, I was under heavy stress and pressure because of the sin in my life. And I was really in a dark place. And now here I am a year later, and I'm just like, things are going great. And eventually something's going to come back around because I don't learn that good. Something's going to come back around. I'll learn, right? Something's going to come back around again, and I will be, hopefully I don't go down as far this time. Hopefully I come down. That's one of the things I like that our pastor said this weekend is he said, when we confess continually, even though it's little tiny things, he goes, those are little sins that separate, and then those are little falls. You confess it, and it's a little fall. It's a little fall. And so there's great grace and mercy for all of us, no matter how big the sin is. But from a mental capacity, man, that's a little fall, right? I don't mind falling in front of you for that much. Like mine, that was like a year ago. Like I had to let it come to this big thing. So my fall was going to hurt more, and I didn't want to confess it because I was going to say, "Hey, I screwed up," and so that means I didn't say anything. Well, then it get a little bit worse. And then I didn't really want to say anything, so now it's going to get a little worse. Now I'm definitely not saying anything. It's going to get a little worse. Now I'm really going to be embarrassed. Now I'm not saying anything. Now it's going to get, and then when it finally happens, it becomes this big fall. Now, the good news is at the bottom, there's some safety mats down there, and that's God's grace and forgiveness and love. And my wife was awesome during that whole thing because she was basically like, of course I forgive you. I've got to work through this. Let me process. But of course I forgive you. I love you. I'm committed to you. We are married. We are one. So let's work through it together. And that was just like Oh, it was just like click, click, and that huge thing just boom, just fell off my back, right? So I think right now, the crying that we're seeing from them, if I'm gonna read between the lines, which I am, Brad's opinion, I think they're feeling the weight of all their decisions. And I think they're getting to the place where like, we've kind of run away from our own people here. We're really living a lie here. We're being attacked by this other group over here, the Amalekites, right? And they're just like, we just have this huge burden on us, and we just are getting to the end of ourselves. We're really kind of getting where we are unable to handle. All right, so now that we've all kind of gotten to this mental place of where they are, let's go to verse 5. Now David's 2 wives were taken captive, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. David was greatly distressed, for the people talked of stoning him, because all the people were bitter in spirit, each over his sons and daughters. But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. Do you see what I'm talking about here? This mental game?
Yeah.
They're like, oh man, here we are. You dragged us out of here, David. If you remember, David showed up into a cave. You remember that story? He showed up into the cave running away from Saul, and the distressed and the heavy burden found him and sought refuge in him. Do you remember that? We talked about that. So he picked up those 600 people, not because he recruited them. He picked up 600 people because they sought him out and they followed him. So we see these people now turning back, and they're now saying, you dragged me out from Israel. I could have been out there with my family, my father-in-law, or my whatever. I could have been wherever. You dragged me out of here. Did David drag them out of there? No. They chose to follow him.
Right.
But oh man, we're good at the victim game. We're really good.
Remember back they were mad at Moses for getting them out of Egypt once upon a time.
We had bread.
Yeah.
We had at least the stew that they would have given us. You had to free us and take us out to the desert. It's crazy, but we are victims of our own mentality.
Right.
And so just like I was sharing with you guys, like you get to this place where it's like, well, I don't deserve to have anything better than this. I don't deserve to be any better than this. I don't deserve to have any increase in my finances, or have any more friends than I have, or have any more health than I have, or whatever it is. And this is not a health and wealth speech. That's not what I'm saying. But I think sometimes we're pretty good at making choices that are bad for us. And then we want to point the finger and say, oh, look, oh, look what happened to it. No, I got to be 500 pounds because I just ate McDonald's 3 times a day for 5 years straight, right? I'm not 500 pounds, but you know, like, you can't say, oh, McDonald's, I'm suing you because you shoved those Big Macs down my throat 3 times a day for 5 years.
I saw this thing on YouTube earlier. Some Canadian suing McDonald's because his kids got fat because he kept feeding his kids McDonald's. He's suing McDonald's because he's feeding his kids McDonald's. Crazy. It's McDonald's fault. That is wild. You're feeding your kids.
There's no personal accountability, no personal responsibility, and definitely it's somebody else's fault.
Yeah. Driving your kids there.
So, again, David was greatly distressed because the people were talking about stoning him.
Yeah.
Talk about victims,
Yeah.
right? Really? You guys found him and rallied around David and followed him wherever he went. Yet, David did this to you.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. Come on. 1 Samuel 30. And we're in verse 7 now. And so David said to Abiathar, the priest, the son of Ahimelech, do you remember that was the one priest who escaped when Saul went in there and his general killed everybody? Abiathar was the son of Ahimelech. It said, please bring the ephod to me. Do you remember what the ephod is?
No.
Mike, what's the ephod?
Who?
The ephod.
I can't hear you.
The ephod. Do you remember what it is?
No.
The ephod is the linen robe,
Oh, yes, right.
and it had the gems on the front of it.
Right on, yes, right.
That had a representation for each of the 12 tribes had their own stone
Exactly.
on it, and it was to represent this is God's people before the sacrifice.
Exactly.
And so when he says, bring the ephod to me, what is he saying here?
Bring me all the people. All the tribes.
Almost. Because he didn't say bring the people, because he could have just said bring the people, or let's go to the people. He said bring the ephod. The ephod represents,
Tribes, you said, the 12 tribes.
well, they're represented there in front of God.
Mm-hmm.
So when he's saying bring the ephod, he's saying bring me before God.
Oh,
Okay.
interesting.
Bring me before God.
Really?
Okay.
If you're a Harry Potter, if you want to use that example, say bring me my wand, what's about to happen?
You're gonna do some magic. I never seen Harry Potter.
Expelliarmus, or whatever the things are, right?
Abracadabra.
So if you tell the priest, bring me the ephod,
Yeah,
what's going to happen?
right.
He's going to minister.
You're gonna wear the ephod and go before God, right?
That's right. He's
Yeah.
going to go before God. So we see David now. We see a glimmer of hope again.
You're right.
He's made some bad choices lately, but we see a glimmer of hope where David says, you know what? Stop. I'm going to go to God with this.
Yeah.
Like, whew, David, thank you. I mean, you're scaring me, man. All this time, and then you really kind of screwed it up. Okay, good. Now we got the ephod, right? So Abiathar brought the ephod to David. Verse 8, David inquired at the Lord, saying, should I pursue after this raiding party? Will I overtake them? Remember how Brad was going to react when all the wives and kids were kidnapped? How was Brad going to react? Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Commando. I'm going to rescue all the kids. I'm going to rescue them. Get them to the chopper. You know, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
David comes to his senses and he says, hold on. Let me go to God with this. Because if God's allowing this to happen, I don't like it, first of all. But second of all, if he's allowing this to happen, he's got to have a reason for this. But if he's allowed this to happen and I'm coming before him, I'm going to ask him, do you want me to go and deal with this? Because he's asked God before, should I attack this army?
Right.
Right? So he's saying, hold on, let me go back to what was working before. God, do you want me to deal with this? And God goes, yeah, let's do it. Let's go. So the end of verse 8 here. And he answered him, pursue them. You will surely overtake them and will surely recover all.
Yeah.
So that is God saying, locked and loaded.
Lock and load. And
Yeah.
Take care of business.
Now it's not just revenge. Now it's not just I'm angry, but now I got God on my 6. I got God right behind me here. Actually, he's probably in front of me too, right? Let's be honest.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so verse 9. So David went, he and the 600 men. So remember the 600 men at Ziklag? So they're chasing after these cats. So 600 men, they're coming down here. And they get to, there's a brook called Bezor right here. So I'll draw it on here for you. On the website, I'll put an actual picture of the map, you know, like I do.
I'm just happy we get the artwork.
But it flows like that, something around there. Actually, I put too much of an angle. It kind of flows, it flows more like this. Right, my bad.
We forgive.
You forgive me, thank you.
Grace.
More like that.
Grace of us.
Yes, yes.
And this is the dry, remember this is the dry river that's the boundary between Israel and Egypt there, right? So this is kind of flowing, it really doesn't flow anywhere because it never rains. I mean,
That's really
so it's really just
there.
right? It's just like a valley in the sand, right? So, all right, so David and his men, 600 men, they were with them, and they came to the brook Bezor, where those that were left behind remained. But David pursued, he and 400 men, for 200 were too exhausted to cross over the brook. Remember, they had just hiked 3 days
Yeah.
coming down. They cried until they were too tired,
Yeah.
and then they got up and started chasing these guys. So 200 of them, a third of the men, were like, David, I'm with you, but I can't take another step. I'm literally exhausted. So, those that were too exhausted to cross over the Bezor remained behind with all the gear, basically, right? So they found an Egyptian in the field. So they crossed over and they found over here in the field. And by field they mean desert, because there's nothing here. They found an Egyptian in the field and took him to David. Now, why would there be an Egyptian out here? We haven't heard anything about Egyptians all of 1 Samuel, right?
The Nile's in Egypt, right?
The Nile is in Egypt, yeah? So what that likely tells us Egypt is still a superpower, right? An ancient superpower. Israel's in battle with Philistines up here. The Philistines have, they have exfiltrated out of their own territory to go attack Israel up here. And the Amalekites said, hey, we're going to go and raid down here, and then we're going to come back to where we are in northwest Saudi Arabia. Why would there be an Egyptian in the mix? Likely, again, this is just based on my research, what I think, Brad's thought, okay, is that is likely not a prisoner of war. That's likely someone who sold himself to pay off his debt, and he is a servant of somebody, one of these Amalekites over here. Because that would be, why would I, just to use modern day countries, okay, why would I be a servant of some dude who lives in Honduras? Like, why would that, what would have to transpire for me to become,
You have to owe them.
right?
Yeah.
So when you think about that, it's like, okay, like he got himself sideways. And to pay off his debts, the Amalekite guy who had raided and plundered and whatever, he's like, well, here's some gold, I'll buy that dude from you. Okay?
I got a question.
Yes.
So it says a field. I'm wondering, is there a chance that way back when, during this time, there was a field there, and it wasn't how the layout is now?
Yeah, was it as dry then?
No, so yes, it was as dry as it is now there. And I actually have a whole separate conversation we'll cover during our Easter series. But it says it makes me to lay down in green pastures, Psalm 23. That, you look at that in your eyes, like you're looking at Kansas, like the waves of grain, right? That's not what they would have thought a green pasture is. What they would have thought a green pasture is these hills in the Negev desert here. They have hills, and as the warm, moist air comes off of the Mediterranean, it will settle as dew onto those blades of grass. And so there's still paths where the shepherds push their flocks through, and the sheep will go right here, and there'll be a walking path, and there will be like little tufts of grass, right. And the sheep will eat on this side and this side and this side and this side, and then another sheep is here eating this side and this side, this side and this side, and that is their green pasture. And you know what's special about it? We think, because we're seeing these huge fields of wavy, grains of wheat or whatever out there. That's not what they had. What the shepherd had to do was he had to say, here is this green field that is going to supply the grass for my sheep for today. Then I will herd them, get them to sleep, and then I will take them to this green pasture tomorrow to supply their needs for tomorrow. Each day, our daily bread. And so when we think about it, we think about, oh, well, I've just got this endless supply of, wheat fields of grains blowing in the wind and whatever. That's not what they had. Their green pasture was literally a day by day providence.
Wow. Yeah.
So not endless. It wasn't endless.
It wasn't endless.
That's crazy. A lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of work.
Yeah.
That's why shepherds were always out in the field.
Now, my question is how confident are you that's the way it was?
When you read Psalm 23, it's pretty confident. And you can look at the shepherds have been doing the same stuff in the same area for so long. I mean, it hasn't changed. It's still doing that today.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Because it's cost ineffective to try to irrigate the desert. Because it's going to evaporate. And the type of soil, it's because the water's going to go down. It won't stay in the soil layer to let things grow. It'll either just go through the ground or it'll evaporate, or both. So it's not cost effective to irrigate that area. So those shepherds are still doing exactly what they were doing. I've got a video, I'll show it to you. Not right now,
Okay.
but eventually. So they found an Egyptian in the field. So somebody who, in my opinion, got himself sideways, sold off to pay a debt, and he's just a servant, right? He doesn't really champion the Amalekite cause, right? He just happens to be there. And they took him to David, and he gave him bread, and he ate, and they made him drink water, and they gave him a part of a cake of figs and 2 cakes of raisins. So they're basically like, the dude's hungry, he's starving, he's dehydrated. 11 and 12. He's dehydrated, he's hungry, and when he had eaten, his spirit came back to him, for he had not eaten bread or drunk any water for 3 days and nights. Verse 13, David said to him, all right, you got your wits about you. Who do you belong to? What are you doing out here? And where are you from? And he said, I'm a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite, and my master left me because 3 days ago I fell sick. Well, 3 days ago, if I fell sick, even if I just was weak and I fell sick, but maybe, what if he had a stomach bug or he had diarrhea or who knows what, right? They're like, we're not even gonna deal with you, whatever. So he's left out there sick, no food, no water, right? I mean, the dude's not doing good. So he's just they just revived the dude. And so he's gonna tell him the truth. He's like, I got no reason to lie to you. So here's what's going on. So we raided the south of the Kerethites, the south of Judah. So the Kerethites, Judah, all of this land up in here. So they had raided up in here and they were going around to come back around this direction, okay? In the south of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire. With his own words. He tells them what happened. And David said to him, will you bring me down to this raiding party? Will you tell me where they're camping? And he said, swear to me by God that you will neither kill me nor deliver me into the hand of my master, and I will bring you down to the raiding party. So don't put me back with them. Get me out of that situation. And we got a deal? We good? We good? Shake on it? Okay, good. All right, so verse 16. When he brought him down, they were spread out all over the land, eating, drinking, and dancing because of the great spoil which they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. Verse 17, David struck them from twilight until the evening of the next day. So twilight is sunset, right? Until the evening, which is sunset again. So for 24 hours, he's kicking butt. Wow. I'm going to tell you right now, have you ever heard of, I think his name is David Casimir? He's an ultra marathoner. He will run for 100 to 200 miles nonstop. Really sicko type people.
If you can do that and you're doing that, good for you, but wow.
I'm going to tell you right now, David was among the awesomest people on the planet. Because look, hike for 3 days, cry his eyes out, hike over here, and then go kick people's butt for 24 hours straight. I mean, the dude hadn't slept in like a week.
I think running more than 1 mile at a time sounds crazy. You know, more than running a mile, it's a big deal. You're gonna run more than one. Wow. Wow.
Running shakes your guts up.
Yeah, I got a truck that runs just fine.
Right.
I was gonna do any running. I'm gonna run my
I
truck.
do a lot of walking. I do a lot of walking, and running to me is just stupid.
Well, I've hiked the 100 miles, the Lone Star Trail.
It's
I mean,
nutritious. I'm not talking down.
It took me a week to hike 100 miles.
It ain't nutritious, I'll tell you that.
But
What, running?
I wasn't fighting people. I wasn't,
That's probably better than your
I was just hiking along,
Yeah.
I can imagine hiking and fighting people for that long. All right. So he kicks butt for a whole day. And no man escaped except 400 young men who rode on camels and fled.
Yep.
So wherever they going, if you're going on camels, you're going out into the desert in the sand where it's very difficult for humans to walk on. Camels have large hoof prints, so it spreads their weight out across it. So they're heading out into the Arabian desert.
You got probably 200 camels.
Yeah. Yep.
No
So,
one escaped except, like, this is kind of funny, No one escaped.
well, that tells you probably the size. If he's saying that 400 got away, they probably was, 2,000 or something, right? So that just probably, to me, gives me inclination as to how big the party originally was. That 400 got away. Because I was like, oh man, that was a small part of the whole thing. So David recovered, verse 18. David recovered all that the Amalekites had taken. Now, who did they pillage? If you'll remember, they pillaged the Kerethites, the south of Judah, and the south of Caleb, and Ziklag, right? So they have 4 locations that they had pillaged. So David recovered all that the Amalekites had taken. So it wasn't just what was in Ziklag. He's got more stuff. He's got more stuff. Now there was nothing missing from the smallest thing to the greatest. So it was like, oh yeah, my grandma got me that cross necklace and someone had stolen it. He's like, nope, here it is. I got it accounted for. Boom, done. What?
In the ESV it says, and his 2 wives.
And his 2 wives. Yeah, I stopped in the middle of this. It said, smallest thing to the greatest, neither sons nor daughters or plunder or anything which they had taken back. David brought all of it back. Right? And David took all the flocks and the herds, which they drove before the other livestock, and they said, this is David's spoil. So all the other flock and everything else from the other 3 towns besides Ziklag, which was originally theirs, but the other locations, he took it all back to Ziklag. So, I'm gonna throw it out there. Let's see if you pick it up. David could have, in his own power, gone out there and skirmished with those guys and rescued his wives. Maybe. David could have gone up here and fought against his relatives up here. But you notice what David did. He stopped and said, God, what do you want me to do? And God was like, yes, thank you, David. I just wanted to talk to you, man. I hadn't talked to you in a while. It's been a little while. So yeah, go down there. I'm going to give you your wives, give you your stuff back. And I'm going to give you all the other stuff. And none of your guys die. And you're not fighting relatives. And you're going to go back to your home with everything you had, except you had to rebuild your house. But you're going to have plenty of resources to be able to rebuild. So you'll even be even better off than you were.
Job.
Exodus, whenever they left, remember?
Right.
The Egyptians said, not only, okay, you're free to go, but get out of here. And here's our silver and gold.
Yeah.
Take it and get out of here. They left with all the riches. So we see this again. This is this circular pattern over and over again. All right? Verse 21. Then David came to the 200 men who were too exhausted. Remember, they stayed at the Bezor brook here. And they went out to meet David and the people who were with him. And David came near to the people and he greeted them. Then all the wicked and worthless ones from the men who went with David answered and said, well, because those 200 didn't go with us, we won't give them anything from the spoils that we have rescued. Look what we have done. Ha ha, we're amazing. Right? Because they did not go with us, we will not give them anything from the spoil that we have rescued, except to every man his wife and his children, that they may lead them away and depart. And David said, you won't do that. You're not going to do that. My brothers, with what the Lord has given us, for he has preserved us and has delivered into our hand the raiding party that came against us. And who will listen to you in this matter? Indeed, as the share is of the one going down to battle, so will be the share of the one staying with the equipment. They will share equally. And so it was from that day forward that he set it as a statute and an ordinance for Israel to this day. When David came to Ziklag, he sent part of the spoil to his friends, the elders of Judah, saying, here is a gift to you from the spoil of the enemies of the Lord. Now, this is a little bit, have you heard the phrase, Jesus says, be as innocent, shrewd as a serpent, but innocent as doves? Shrewd as a serpent means like, I'm gonna work the system. Innocent as a dove means, but I'm not doing it in a sinful way. So, where did they get the spoils? From the raiding party, from the Amalekites. Where did the Amalekites get the stuff? The south of Judah and Ziklag in the Philistine area.
Yeah.
In the south of Judah. South of Judah. South of Judah. So let's go back in. Let's see what it says here. Verse 26. When David came to Ziklag, he sent part of the spoil to his friends, the elders of Judah, saying, here's a gift to you, not here's your stuff back,
Yeah.
but here's a gift to you from the spoil of the enemies of the Lord.
He thinks he gives him some, not everything back.
He gives them some stuff back, but David then, shrewd as a serpent, innocent as a dove, looks like the hero.
Yeah.
Right? Look what he did. To those that were in Bethel and Ramoth Negev and in Jatir, to those that were in Aroer, Sithmoth, Eshtemoa, and Rechal, to those that were in the cities of the Jerahmeelites and the Kenites, to those that were in Hormah, Bor, Ashan, Athak, and in Hebron, and to those who were in all the other places where David and his men had roamed. So David and his men didn't keep all the spoils. They sent it in. Why would you send a gift to somebody?
Be friends.
To be friends. Okay? If I walked over there and I slapped you in the face and I said, hey, how you doing, friend? You'd be like, what? But if I walked over and I gave you a hug, I said, how you doing, friend?
Yeah,
You would accept me, right?
yeah.
Well, the same thing happened, if you remember back in our Genesis study, Jacob and Esau. Jacob stole Esau's birthright, ran away for a while, and then he accumulated great wealth, and he wanted to go back to his brother. And do you remember what he did? He sent a parade of flocks, women, riches, gold, ahead of him to his brother before he showed up, so that his brother would be buttered up.
Yeah.
So we see David sending to all these different locations. It wasn't just the south of Egypt, but it was all these locations across here. Hey, here's a little something from the enemies of God that we beat them, and so we're giving you guys a little something here. What do you feel like is happening?
Yeah.
What do you
So
think?
he's buttering them up.
Oh, maybe he's buttering them up,
I
right?
wonder is how was the relationship with those people prior?
I don't know.
We don't know.
Don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I know Saul killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s.
Yeah. He's probably got some beef with them prior.
Or maybe the beef was with Saul, it wasn't with the people. Right? Because we know that Saul said, the people love David. He's going to be the king. Remember? He confessed that. So let's go into chapter 31 now, right?
Yeah.
When the Philistines were fighting against Israel, on the other side of town, they're fighting Israel, okay? So we've been dealing out here, now we're going back up here. The Philistines were fighting against Israel, and Israel's fighting men, the soldiers, fled before the Philistines. They ran away, and they fell slain on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines overtook Saul and his sons, and the Philistines killed his sons, Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua, Saul's sons. The battle was heavy against Saul, and the archers found him. He was severely wounded by the archers. And Saul said to his armor bearer, draw your sword and thrust me with it, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and abuse me. But his armor bearer would not, for he was very afraid. And therefore Saul took his sword and fell upon it. Right?
Right.
He falls on the ground, he's dying, and when his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he fell on the sword too. So now we've got a shish kebab going on.
What was he fell on his sword intentionally?
Yes.
Yeah, because he wanted his friend to kill him.
Yeah. So Saul died with his 3 sons and his armor bearer, together with all his men on that same day. And when Israel's fighting men who were on the other side of the valley, and those who were on the other side of the Jordan, so remember the Jordan River is right here, so they were coming across the other side of the valley, coming across to Mount Gilboa, which is on the south side, and then there was apparently some over here. I don't know what they were doing, like just watching a battle. Oh, that's cool. Like they did in the Civil War when they would just show up on Sunday, dress and bring a picnic and watch them North and South fight at Antietam or at the Gettysburg or whatever. It's crazy. So it says that when they were on the other side of the Jordan, saw that Israel's fighting men fled, the soldiers fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead. They abandoned the cities and fled. So the Philistines came and lived in them. So you have now this whole stretch of the Jezreel Valley now. The Philistines are living in here. Remember, what did I talk about this right here? You remember that? Remember this road? Remember what it's called?
The green.
The Via Maris, the way of the sea. And that's because it goes along the Mediterranean Sea here, and then it comes up through Megiddo. Remember, it comes over that cliff and goes down. And they would make that, as people were trying to come from this direction, come here, from Galilee over to here, through that long, wide valley, they got to that Megiddo, and they had to go up the switchbacks to get into that town to go through, and so they would tax them, right? So now the Philistines is now in charge of all of this Jezreel Valley and Megiddo, because the people just ran away. The following day, when the Philistines came to strip the dead, to go pillage and plunder whatever they could find on the soldiers, they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa, and they cut off his head. And they stripped off his armor, and they sent them, the pieces, into the land of the Philistines round about, to make it known in the house of their idols and among their people. They put his armor in the house of the Ashtaroth, which is the female god that they worshipped, and Baal was the male god they worshipped. Okay? And they fastened his body to the wall of Beth Shan. Beth Shan is basically right here at the Jezreel Valley, meeting with the Jordan River. That's where Beth Shan is. And when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead is over here in the hill country, heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose and went all night, and they took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan, and they came to Jabesh and burned them there. And then they took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree at Jabesh, and they mourned fasting for 7 days.
Yeah.
Israel's in trouble. They are now leaderless, and the leader they had was worthless.
Saul was the leader, right? Okay.
And he's now dead. So they're leaderless. And the one when he was here, he was worthless. The Philistines have now taken over a big section of the central upper north part of the central part of Israel here.
Did the Philistines have a leader?
Well, they each ran their own little city, like its own little country, basically. And so they have,
Like ancient Greece or something?
yeah. And so we have this land here is the Philistines, and now this land through here is the Philistines. And so the Israelites, the Jews, are kind of trapped in this little pocket in these hills here. And then we got David back in Ziklag. He's got spoil. He's got momentum. He sought God out. He sent gifts to these people saying, hey, remember me? This is like a little birthday present for you. I remember you on your birthday. Remember me on my birthday. So that is where we stop.
Where's this tree that they buried the bones?
Jabesh it's one of the little villages in here.
Right there.
Yeah.
All right.
And so that is the end of 1 Samuel. And so we'll have to begin 2 Samuel over the beginning of 2024. We'll start 2 Samuel. So next week we will do a testimonial night. Share.
It's been a year or two, huh?
Yeah, it's been a while. We'll share
A few, but yeah.
what God has been doing in my life, what I've been going through, and then what I've seen evidence of God doing in my life. Let's call it that. That's testimonial night. We'll all kind of go around and do that. And then we'll do the start to Christmas study, kind of going through that stuff. That'll get us to the end of the year. And then we got like Thanksgiving. We won't meet for Thanksgiving. I'll be out of town, whatever. And then January we'll start 2 Samuel.
We won't find out where David's gonna be king for
No,
a year.
it's cliffhanger.
I've
Cliffhanger.
never read past here, or I've never read 1 Samuel.
I mean, either I was like, yeah. Right.
So
My assumption is that if David's buttered them up, you know, David's starting to be friends with people. David's got all this stuff. He's got his crew. He's back talking to God. Like, the assumption is that Saul's dead. Saul was the leader of Israel.
Yep.
It only makes sense that David steps in.
We'll see. I can't give anything away.
I know.
There's no way of you knowing what the story is either.
Right.
No possible way you would know what it was. And then we'll do 2 Samuel in the spring. That'll get us to the spring. And then next summer, we're going to do a cultural overlay of practices primarily in the Gospels that we just go over our head that actually mean something that we just don't pay attention to. That'll be next summer. And then next fall, we'll go into Revelation. So that's what the next year looks like. It's going to be fun. Hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed 1 Samuel. I've enjoyed going through it.
Yeah.
I'm learning just like you guys are learning, and I'm going through and studying. And so for me, it's important. And again, we think, oh, this is the land of Israel. But it's like it's like between here and Conroe. I mean, it's not a very big area. Well, this from here to here, I'm sorry, from the top of the Sea of Galilee to the bottom of Sea of Galilee is the top of Lake Conroe to the bottom of Lake Conroe, like the north and south end. It's just not that big. So yeah, this is like going to downtown Houston. It's just not that far.
Are you willing to do a quick overview of 1 Samuel?
Did it already.
Before I came
You'll have to go back and watch the video.
Okay.
We did it at the very beginning.
That was good. That was the best part of the meeting today was when you did that overview. That reminded, cause I forget stuff anymore. My mind is just, doesn't remember anything. That was, really brought me back to, one whole piece.
Yeah,
Made the whole thing worthwhile.
yeah. And
Me
Saul
Yeah.
is out.
Oh, yeah. He's out.
So-
See?
It was like
You
1
learn
Samuel
something.
25 when I first joined here.
Mm-hmm.
Someone died as soon as I joined.
Africa.
Samuel,
Samuel.
the prophet of God.
Things.
Yep, he died.
Is this the Samuel that like held the pillars?
That's Sam's son.
Okay, that's what we're gonna do.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.